Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Men for the Win is sponsored by the Grand Group with Edina Realty. Are you looking to purchase a new home in the Twin Cities area? Or perhaps you're trying to sell your current home? Whether you're upsizing or downsizing, the Grand Group with Edina Realty will meet all of your housing needs. Contact the Grand Group by emailing thegrand, G-R-A-N, group at edinarealty.com or call them by phone at 612-817-8751. The Grand Group with Edina Realty, 7-time Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine Super Agent Award winners. On this episode, David and Hoges recap the Twins' 3-game series against the Houston Astros. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win. My name is David Kufis, and with me in studio is Andrew Hoges Hoganson, back from his long fiesta in Florida. Come back, you look nice and tan, Hoges.
Oh, it was a blast. It was fun to get away, but I mean, you definitely learn when you have kids that it's not necessarily a vacation anymore. It's more of a trip. I mean, we sat out by the pool most of the time, but when you're trying not to have two little boys drown the whole time, you definitely got to be on your toes. But it was a blast. The family had a ton of fun. We got home late Friday, so I'm still shaking out the cobwebs a little bit, but I think we planned it pretty well. This weather in Minnesota is looking pretty fantastic for this next week, and today was gorgeous.
Yeah, it's been nice. It's been nice to be outside a little bit. And speaking of Hoges,
you got great weather for opening day, didn't you?
Yeah, it was quite wonderful. So it was 55, and I was sitting left field bleachers, and the sun was pouring down, Hoges, and I was overdressed, long underwear, the whole gambit, and I'm just like trying to take off my layers, trying to figure out how to get comfortable, and it was a bit of a mess, but my goodness, I have some thoughts. So folks, we normally don't have like a really extended intro segment, but I just have a few things that I have to say about my experience on opening day at Target Field this season. First of all, the Hamilton singer, if you've listened to the show for a while, you know I'm not a musical guy. That is not something that I would ever choose to listen to, and both Dan and Hoges, big proponents of musicals, especially Hamilton. Well, they had a Hamilton singer come in to do the national anthem by the name of D. Jerome. This was the best anthem I've ever heard live. Like, it was that good. He started it on a note, and I'm like, that's just too high. Like, there's just no way. There's no way he's going to be able to finish this. It was phenomenal.
Say what you will about any performances by those actors or whatever, but they have pipes. Like, I'm happy that you at least can't deny that part. There still is some sort of a song in your heart where you're able to recognize the talent that they have.
Another note, Dick Bramer was unable to attend. He had COVID. It was his first missed opening game in 40 years, Hoges.
Yeah, I saw his tweet. That's wild. I mean, 40 years is absolutely insane. And I know we give that guy a lot of grief, but I felt bad for him. I mean, that's a bummer to end that streak. But I thought Provis was great. It was really kind of jarring. I texted you, and that's not the right word because I did enjoy like the job he did, but it seemed so weird hearing a voice that you normally don't see a picture going to. And I thought he filled in very well.
Yeah, I think he's great, and I think that will likely be the natural course. Right, like when Bramer does decide to call it quits, I'm guessing Provis is the next guy up.
Well, and to give Provis a lot of credit, it is very different calling a game on TV than it is calling on radio. I mean, you have to describe everything, obviously, when you're describing it on the radio, and I thought he did a fantastic job of knowing when to just be quiet and let the play speak for itself. So I thought he did very, very well.
Yeah, so then a couple of other notes here about Target Field. One, I never left my seat for food or for beer. And Hoges, you know me. I like food. I'm a food guy. I'm a big fan. Here's the deal. If you leave your seat, and on opening day, I'm sure it's obviously way worse than it'll be during the regular season for the most part, but you would miss an inning. Almost certainly you're going to miss an entirety of an inning because of the new pitch clock rules.
Yeah, it's so wild because, I mean, we kind of talked about this already with when you and I went and watched the game for the watch party for the season opener. Your brain just can't handle how fast everything goes. We would look to each other and talk, and it'd be the start of an inning, and next thing you know, there'd be two guys on base, and it felt like we had a 1-minute conversation where we should have maybe missed 2 pitches. But then at the same time, when I'm watching at home, it's incredible because it's nonstop action. Like the ball is always in play. So I think this is kind of going to be a theme. We're going to love it when we're watching at home, but in person, when you're at the game, it's just a little different. So yeah, I can see that. Like, how are you going to sneak up and get a beer quick and get back without missing anything?
Exactly. And it should be noted, beer sales, though, now will run through the end of the 8th inning. Another thing to note here is that with the new screens, it's great. The new giant screen is huge. The right field screen is really great also. They've also increased the size of the ribbon that runs along the ballpark, and it's great because it gives you all that information that you're looking for. Pitch count, all of those stats, launch angle, all of the sort of more advanced things that you don't always get to see. But one thing I'll say, I know they're working out the kinks of the system, right? But there were a couple of times where the count was not showing, and that drove me nuts. Like, because at home, you are constantly aware of the count. And sometimes at the ballpark, when you're there, it's a little bit harder to keep track because there's a lot of other things going.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You constantly are referencing that. And so when it froze and it's like, the count is 0-0, and I'm like, pretty sure this is like the fifth pitch of the at-bat. It's definitely not 0-0.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That'd be really tough. I mean, that's the most important thing. You don't care about launch angle or velo. Sorry, not velocity. Velo when you're at the game, but you do care about the count. The one question that I had for you though, where do they put the pitch clock? Is that pretty easy to see when you're watching in the stands?
Yeah, no, it's right to the left of where I was sitting. If you're looking at home plate, it's right to the left. So
Okay.
You just can't see it on TV, but it's like immediately off screen.
So the batters and the pitchers both can see pretty easily because is the batters one still like just to the left of the batter's eye then where they always used to have like the in between innings or whatever where there was the 2-minute timer, it's in that same spot.
Yep, same exact spot. And like really it seemed like especially for right-handed hitters, they could see the pitch clock where it was. So it was sort of like they're probably referencing the one behind home plate more than the one in the batter's eye actually.
Yeah, makes sense. I still say, I mean, even being at the game, would you still say you liked having the pitch clock, or do you wish that it was back to how it used to be at the game?
I like it because I think there's more of an expectation of what the timeline of the game will likely be. Obviously, this one went into extras, so that's sort of an additional component here. But I think it does help, and I think it helps people to sort of plan out their day around making their way down to the stadium.
And the one thing that I think is super important to note with the pitch clock cutting these games down by what I don't know what it's averaging now, 20 to 30 minutes, you're losing 20 to 30 minutes of a pitcher walking around the mound. You're not missing 20 to 30 minutes of action. So many people are like, well, it shouldn't be shorter. That's how but you're not actually missing any gameplay at all. You're cutting out a lot of fat that just didn't need to be there. And I think overall that's a win, but it is interesting to watch this year how it is impacting a lot of things that maybe we didn't think about right away. And some things that we absolutely did think about with concessions. I mean, they've already changed the rules on that.
I did want to say too, so I went to the opener with my brother and a couple of buddies. But as we're driving home, my brother turns to me and he says, as a more casual baseball guy, I do have to say the pitch clock does make me more interested in the game because the pace of play is so much quicker. It doesn't feel like there's so much downtime throughout the game, which there's not. And so we as ball guys, I think we sort of have this idea in our head of like what baseball should be. And sometimes I think we get really protective of it and we don't like these new rules because of baseball being such a historic sport, stats driven. The history there is just so great. And so anytime there's these major changes to try and get new fans, we kind of like to poo-poo it and be like, what new fans is baseball possibly going to attract who aren't already baseball fans? Maybe we're in the wrong here, Hoges. And maybe I'm speaking out of turn for you. You can have your own thoughts, obviously. But for me thinking, oh yeah, there's not going to be new fans to this sport because they added a pitch clock. Seeing the impact now, Hoges, I'm starting to think maybe more guys are going to check out the sport.
Right when you started talking, I instantly wanted to call you a hypocrite because we had this conversation last year where you're like, what new fans? I don't care about them. Let's care about the fans that we currently have. But you are speaking for me. I do agree. Like, because your brother does care about baseball. It's just not on the same level as we do. Those fans I am interested in keeping around. It's not like we're going to be taking someone who's never heard of the game. And I mean, that will happen, but I think this rule helps everyone and not just the more traditional people, but it does help the general fan care more about a game that's going to have more action because it was getting out of hand. And the thing that we need to remember too when we're talking about this is games 20 years ago were not 3.5 hours. So this is
Correct.
Almost getting baseball closer to its roots than it used to be. I think it's a good thing. It's hard to argue that.
So we have talked a lot about a lot of different things that have very little to do with this series, Hoges, in which the Twins took 2 of 3 from the Astros at home. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and jump into the series recap.
Series recap.
Home opener, Hoges. Energy is high. A ton of fans in the stands. And the Twins managed to win it in a walk-off situation in the bottom of the 10th inning after the Astros managed to scrape a run across in the top of the inning.
Who would have thought? A team that we went 0-6 against last year, we win the first game in extras with Mr. Kyle Farmer getting one through. And, I mean, the Twins don't win against the Astros. Not only that, they don't win in extra innings. We learned that last year, especially when the away team scores first. Like there's just, you might as well just go home at that point in time. But they managed to push 2 across. Miranda got an RBI in that inning as well. I mean, this was pretty fantastic. It's a great home opener. What more could you ask for a game?
It would be hard to ask for more, especially because the ending sort of overshadowed the beginning of the game. It'd be very difficult to not talk about Sonny Gray here, Hoges. 7 innings pitched, 13 strikeouts.
Tied his career high for strikeouts. And that would, I mean, as we'll see later, that became a theme in this series. The Astros struck out a lot. It's hard to bat as well when you don't know what pitch is coming.
Just the constant shots. I love it. But so after Gray came out of the game, it went Jax, Duran, and then Lopez. And Hoges, the back end of this bullpen is looking like the real deal.
It really is. I mean, Jax had that hiccup against the Marlins, but Duran and Lopez are looking just lights out this year. And I mean, I think Duran we kind of knew would be like that, but it's been so encouraging for me to see Lopez just really hitting his stride in that role and looking more like he did at the first half of last year than he did when he got traded to the Twins.
If you haven't watched this game, you should go back and watch the condensed game, or at least the highlights, because it's a really interesting game to sort of watch how things develop. The only real note I had on this game, other than all of the stuff from my first time being at the stadium for the season, as far as for live baseball, there was a ball hit on the Astros' first RBI, hit to Gallo and right, and Gallo misplayed it. And I think he misplayed it because he was very concerned about the limestone wall, and he didn't know how to actually adjust if it was going to hit the limestone. And so he took a terrible line on that ball. If Kepler's in that game, I truly think that Kepler catches that ball.
Yeah, it's a real thing. That wall is a real thing with that weird overhang because it's not even symmetrical either. It juts out farther as you get closer to center field than it does right at right field. So I think that's going to be something to watch for sure. And Gallo, we should point out, is a Gold Glove outfielder. Like, he is an incredible outfielder. So, I mean, hopefully he can adjust. But part of what makes Kepler so good at that position is that he has so many years of experience with dealing with that wall.
Yeah, and it should be noted, Kepler has moved to the IL officially now. Matt Wallner was called up, and Joey Gallo hasn't played in a game since the opener, so he's dealing with some right side soreness, which just sounds kind of pretend.
Yeah, it sounds like the MRI that they got was what they wanted to see, so it sounds like it'll hopefully be good news for him. But David, I don't want to be right here, but we kind of called the Kepler one that it sounded like it was a lot more serious than it ended up being.
100%.
But yeah, and honestly, it makes me a little worried about Gallo now too.
Yes.
Yeah, I just feel like they always undersell these injuries, and I know they're going to be careful in April, and I am okay with that. But I mean, they're 2 guys that are pretty important to our team, and 2 guys that play similar positions. So it's something to watch.
So let's go to game 2. And again, Hoges, it's the starting pitching who sort of gets it done. How much credit do you give Joe Ryan for this outing?
I give Ryan a lot of credit for this outing. I mean, he ended up having 6 innings pitched with 4 earned runs and 10 strikeouts, one of which was due to the new pitch clock rules, which was really weird watching on TV when all of a sudden it was just like, oh, he struck out. Abreu was up to bat and he had 2 strikes on him and he didn't show readiness to the pitcher before 8 seconds, and that was it. So it was really bizarre. Joe Ryan even looked kind of flustered on the mound, almost like, well, I can still throw to him. But yeah, that was the strikeout.
So there's a couple other things that happened in this game. Obviously, the Twins scored 9 runs, so they win this one 9-6, and everybody got in on the action. But there were a couple of bigger at-bats, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the segments. But for pitchers, it went Joe Ryan gave 6, and then Lopez, Jax, Moran, and Duran. And we should say Moran was not really planning to not finish that game. But he began to struggle so much, they had to bring in Duran to close it out.
Yeah, and I think that was an interesting call, which I think we'll get to later in our segments. But I was a little bit surprised to see Duran coming in at the end of that game. But it was cool seeing Buxton get a homer and Farmer get another homer. I mean, he's looking really good. It's definitely a positive to have that guy in the lineup.
All right, well, let's go to game 3. The really only downside to this series, Hoges, Twins lose this one 5-1. They cannot get the offense going. They only scrape together 2 hits. Tyler Mahle looks okay, but again, he gave up 4 earned runs, had 6 strikeouts. He seems like he's at least healthy, so I guess I'm happy about that.
Yeah, and I think Rocco summed it up pretty good in his post game where he said he wasn't terrible and he wasn't amazing. He was somewhere within that realm. Like, he pitched fine, and Rocco even said if we get a little bit more offense, that's a game that we're probably going to win. And David, not to do this to you because I know you hate this, but Hunter Brown actually is on my fantasy baseball team. So there was a bit of a silver lining to this game for me. I always 100% want the Twins to win, even if it hurts my fantasy baseball team. But if they have to lose, it's not a bad bad guy to lose to.
Okay, enough of that, Hoges. I want to shut that down early, okay? I just do not care. Anytime anybody talks about anything fantasy related, if you're not in the league with that person, it's just deaf ears, Hoges. Nobody's listening to you talk.
I think one of our listeners cares about my fantasy baseball team.
Okay, one guy. Hoges, it's lowest common denominator here. We're not trying to speak to one guy about your fantasy team. My goodness. Okay, enough about this. We'll get into some other notes here from the series. Let's jump into our segments.
Catch 'em all, Kirby Puckett!
Puckett's Picks Winner.
Puckett's Picks Winner, Hoges. Every series, we pick the person we think is going to perform best in the following series. I took Correa because I have a standing rule that if Correa is available when it's my turn to pick, I will take him. And that hasn't worked out so well so far this season.
So well.
So Correa finishes with -2 points. Not a great outing from Correa. But in a fascinating turn of events, I assumed that Hoges ran away with this one with Trevor Larnach. But he actually only comes away with 2 points because he struck out 4 times. Dan took Nick Gordon, who was his third choice, but he was the last person to pick. And Dan gets the victory with Gordon because neither him nor Larnach had a home run, which is the first tiebreak, but also Gordon never struck out. So he gets the tiebreak over Larnach. They each had 2 points. Dan gets the victory.
Yeah, just unbelievable. But I actually have 2 silver linings to take away from this. One, and most importantly, you are still not on the scoreboard this year for Puckett's Picks. And 2, Nick Gordon happens to be on my fantasy baseball team as well. So
oh, my goodness. Stop it, Hoges.
Good series.
My goodness. Okay, anyway, season standings here. Dan now has 2 victories. The listeners have 1, and I have had a slow out of the gate start because I've picked Correa 3 times, and he's totaled exactly, looks like 2 points positive if you add all of his points together.
It's been a rough start. It's been a rough start of the year for him. But everyone remember, it was a rough start last year too, and he ended up being the team MVP.
All right, well, let's keep going. Beast versus bench.
Beast versus bench.
Is losing fun? Is losing fun?
I'll let you go first for your Beast pick, Hoges.
I'm going with Farmer for my Beast. He had the game winner in the home opener, which was awesome. It was kind of cool hearing his post-game interview where he said he didn't even see it go through because of the weird shadows with how the game was being played. So he wasn't 100% sure it was a hit right away. And then the 3-run homer in game 2 was awesome too. It seems like he's really fitting in on this team. But the one kind of extra thing that I want to give him credit for is we were able to sit Correa during the day game today to give him his first off day, maybe a little bit of a reset with how he's been playing. And to be able to have a guy like that who is an MLB quality starter playing shortstop and for him to still be able to produce. I know he didn't do great today. He went 0 for 2 with a couple walks, but I think that's just huge to be able to give Correa a spell. And Correa is a durable guy. He's been playing, like he played, 120 games last year outside of COVID and breaking his fingers. So it's not a guy that needs a lot, but it's just super nice to know that we have that utility guy there. And to see him produce is awesome. And hey, maybe that's what the Twins needed for extra inning games, is a guy that wasn't a Twin last year.
It's funny to think about how he could have been the starting shortstop for this team for the duration of the season.
Oh, that still terrifies me, but having him as a backup shortstop, that's pretty sweet. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, there was one hit given up today, though, that I think Correa's got a little bit more reach than Farmer does, and I think he would have come down with, he would have stolen a ball that was hit sort of looped over the shortstop's head. But anyway, I think that's a great pick, and honestly, I think he truly is the beast. I'm going to actually give it to Sonny Gray, because I think I think
guy
there
who
was
played one game. Just because Dan Thompson, David, we don't have to do this. He's not here. He's not here, David. Dan Thompson is not here. We don't need to go picking pitchers who only pitched in one game. And yes, it was an absolutely fantastic outing for him, but we don't do this. We don't.
I have to. I think that because a couple of reasons, but specifically, there was so much tension leading into this series, right? Because I had said it from the get-go, and my brother called me out today at our family Easter celebration. He's like, you predicted that they were going to do badly against the Astros. And I said, well, yes, but he sort of just skipped over the beginning part of my prediction, which I said after the first 6 games of the season, they need to come home at least 4-2 because I think the Astros series is going to be rough. So I'm thrilled that they take 2 of 3 from the Astros. But the thing is, because there was so much pressure, because this was sort of the first true test, the Marlins, maybe they're better than we think they are. I really don't think they are. But because there's this first true test, Sonny Gray to give them that start to start this series, I think he's deserving of the beast spot.
Yeah, and 13 strikeouts, it is hard to argue with that. I still think it goes against every rule, but if you're ever going to break it, this isn't a terrible time to do it.
Okay, Hoges, who do you have on your bench?
I'm going to go with Correa, mostly because of his performance in Game 1 in extra innings. Striking out, looking is just not acceptable at this point in time in the season. As, with that caliber of a player, like I get on Twins fans all the time for ripping him for his batting average with runners in scoring position last year, because honestly, I think that's just a fluky number. And anyone who's saying that Correa isn't clutch clearly has never watched him outside of last year. I mean, look at his career. It's unbelievable, but plays like that, you have to put the ball in play. You have to move runners over. And that was just a big moment that he came up short.
I would love to tell you that you're wrong, but I think Correa is a pretty good pick for the bench slot. I'm actually going to go with Joe Ryan. Now, hear me out. Hear me out for just a second. The only reason Joe Ryan is getting the bench spot, I realize it's odd because he got the victory in this particular game, and I realize that he went 6 innings pitched. However, the grand slam that he gave up to Alvarez was ridiculous, Hoges. Absolutely ridiculous. The first pitch of the at-bat, we're not talking a 3-2 where you have to make sure it's over the plate. The very first pitch of the at-bat, a 4-seam fastball, 91.3 miles an hour, center, to a guy who I said in the opener while we were in the stands, I was talking to my brother and one of my buddies, and I'm like, anytime Alvarez is up, just stay away from him. Honestly, I'd rather have you walk him than do anything else. So to do that to the guy on the team who you definitely don't want to do that to, absolutely astounding.
That pitch was grooved. Honestly, if I were up there and you told me that it was going to be a 90-mile-an-hour fastball right down the middle, I might be able to put that ball into play too. So you have one of the best major league hitters. Yeah, of course he's going to dump that one in the stands. I still can't get over those 6-inning pitched, only 4 earned runs, and 9.5 strikeouts. I think that's what we got to call like the pitch clock strikeouts, because it just seems weird giving him 10. He's your bench. He's your bench.
I'm telling you, because of that pitch. Yeah, Correa is probably the true choice. But honestly, I was so annoyed when I saw that pitch that I'm like, no, that is unforgivable, because they could have just as easily lost that game.
I don't think it could have been more middle either. I mean, it was.
That's what I'm saying.
Right down the center of the plate.
Okay, with that, Hoges, let's go on to Rocco's Rewind.
Rocco's Rewind.
So I'm going to start us off. Clearly, Hoges, this is a new era for Twins pitching, because Rocco's hands must have been glued in his pockets, and his legs must have had, his cleats were tied together. I don't know, but this guy is clearly looking at his starters in a very, very different frame of mind. He's like, you know what? You're going to struggle a little bit, but that's okay. You go 6 or 7 innings because you're our starter.
Well, and I love it so far. Like even though like the Ryan like looked like he was struggling in that inning where he gave up the grand slam, letting him go out there a little bit more. I mean, he's settled right back down. So I think it's kind of nice letting these guys who have a lot of experience now, and there are 5 quality starters that we have, and for him to be able to trust them and for them to continue earning that trust, it's going to be very interesting to watch. So far, I'm very happy with it. I think that's one way that you cover for a less deep bullpen.
Yeah, and I do want to say also a good use of Pagan in Game 3.
Yes.
You know, useless innings. Twins are down by 4. That's when I want to see Emilio Pagan on the mound. When their Twins are down big, that's the time for him.
Low leverage. No medium leverage, no high leverage, low leverage.
What do you have for Rocco, Hoges?
And I don't even know if I'm mad about this, but Duran coming in Game 2 to get 1 out after Moran struggled and gave up the home run. And I know the tying run was at the plate, but I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that, David. Like, how do you feel about burning Duran in that situation?
I think it had to be done. It had to be done, because here's the thing. You don't let a team like the Astros see daylight. You got to shut the door. And at that point, Hoges, Moran wasn't getting it done. And I think if you leave that guy in there anymore, who knows what happens, Hoges. You have to shut the door, and Duran's the guy to do it.
And that's a huge win, too. But, I mean, how awesome was it, though, that when he came in, he struck him out on 3 pitches? It was just like, okay, I'm here.
Well, that's great. Let's go into Minnesota Moment.
Minnesota Moment.
So I'm going to piggyback off you here, Hoges, because I'll say in both Game 1 and Game 2, Lopez and Duran each pitched clean innings. And I have to say, Hoges, these guys are showing themselves to be the top dogs of the bullpen, and I am loving every minute of it.
Oh, me too. It's so impressive having two guys that whenever they come out there to have that much confidence that it's just going to be a shutdown inning is pretty awesome to have, especially when you're pairing it with what these 5 starters have done so well. It's hard not to be excited about this staff and the back end of that bullpen. I mean, if we can keep, like we've talked about already, if we can keep kind of hiding what we know is a weakness and the depth of our bullpen by having those starts and getting Duran and Lopez in those high leverage situations, and if they keep producing how they are, man, I mean, that's a pitching staff right there.
I think that I don't know that I've had this much confidence in the back end of the bullpen since that one season where Tyler Duffy and Taylor Rogers were really, really good.
Oh, yeah. I think, and even then it was for only like a brief, like for a second half of that season too, because Duffy didn't start off as well. So yeah, this is incredibly exciting. And again, we're 9 games in. We can't get too far ahead of ourselves, but like I've said so many times before when I've been guest hosting here, early returns are very good right now.
What do you have for your moment, Hoges?
I went with the Buxton homer in game 2 to give that cushion, that 3-run homer that put them up. No, it just seems like whenever he has a bigger moment like that, and I know this wasn't a come from behind or anything like that, but it just seems like they lose a lot when that happens. I can think of so many instances where he hit a go-ahead homer and then only for them to lose a couple innings later, or a tie homer. And then this was just nice for them to hold it off and win and get the victory. And it ended up being huge. And so it was nice to see them pile on and then hold on at the end. So I think that kind of summed up this series. Like they did stuff that they don't normally do, and they were able to use that to take 2 out of 3 from a very good ball club.
Well, and I do have to say, as bad as the pitch was that Joe Ryan pitched to Alvarez, the pitch that Blanco threw to Buxton in that moment was about the same pitch. It's just like, I get it. Pitchers make mistakes. It happens. But my goodness, if you don't, like, I think a pitch like that, when it leaves the pitcher's hands, you got to think he's just praying. He's like, I hope this guy is thinking I'm going to take this pitch, because if he swings, it's gone.
That's exactly what I was going to say, because the second you see Buxton start to, I watched the replay so many times, the second you see him start to swing, you know it's gone. I mean, it's just so weird that I've seen it before. That's gone. And that ball got out so fast. I mean, when it hit the second deck, I think it was still going up. And I got to give credit to Provis on this one. This was another great call. I thought it was cool when Provis was calling it, because he couldn't even do his normal radio home run call because it was already gone so fast and everyone could already see it. So he just shortened it to the last part of it. And then he was just quiet the whole time he was rounding the bases. And Morneau's like, well, that one got out of here quick. And it was just such a cool play, because like we said, the second the ball got out of the pitcher's hand, you're like, oh, that's gone.
And I do appreciate greatly. I love it when he does it on the radio, and I even loved it when he did it on the radio broadcast. Again, we give Bramer a lot of grief, but a big reason why is because a deep fly ball caught by the left fielder about 10 feet into the outfield. No, but Provis, I love what he says. Hit to the outfield, playable. Okay, that means the guy's going to catch it. You're not faking me out thinking it's a home run or a double to a gap or something like that. You're telling me this play is routine. There's nothing to get excited about.
If he continues doing that, and if he really is like the what we think will take over for Bramer eventually, it will add years of life to my life expectancy without a shadow of a doubt. Because I can't tell you how many times I stand up and then it's like to the second baseman because of just a deep fly ball and Carlos Correa squeezes the glove. I mean, it's so frustrating.
All right, well, let's keep going here. Maurer's musings.
I just don't know how it can get any better.
Maurer's musings.
So my question here, Kepler is down on the IL officially. Gallo is down. We're not sure. He hasn't been moved to the IL. It could happen. We're not sure yet. How much of an impact is this? And who does this impact outside of obviously Matt Wallner, who got the call up?
It's really hard to say, because it's not like there's guys like Kirilloff that are close to coming back that it sounds like yet. I mean, it looks like Larnach is cementing his position pretty solidly up here, because he was a little bit of a question mark. And I think you could argue that he was probably the last guy on the roster to make a spot. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I think we lose some power clearly with Gallo being out, and depending on how long that is. But I don't know. I hope Wallner produces. It'd be fun to have them kind of have a little bit of a difficult decision when one of those two guys is back on the field.
I do think that Nick Gordon might see less playing time because of it.
Yeah, he very likely could, because there's not as obvious a position for him to be able to play. And Wallner obviously isn't going to be playing in the infield, so it'll be interesting how that shakes out.
Yeah, you have to think that at first base now, is primarily going to be Solano.
Yeah, and with how he's produced at the plate so far, I mean, he's been pretty good so far. So it's a guy that you don't really want to take his bat out of the lineup. So, yeah, I agree with that.
And with Kyle Farmer playing so well, I mean, your infield is basically going to be Solano, Farmer, Correa, Miranda almost continually. And then again, like you said, Larnach and Taylor, certainly. So really that leaves one outfield spot for either Gordon or Wallner. And you don't want to bring a guy up who's still developing and sit him on the bench. And again, this is coming from the conductor of the Nick Gordon train. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the right call. I'm just saying that there's a good chance to me that Nick Gordon doesn't see all the playing time that I assumed he was going to get to start the season.
Well, and we talked about that a lot when we were trying to figure out if it was going to be Wallner or Garlick, and we said exactly that. If it is Wallner, he needs to play. I mean, this is his moment to play. And just another note kind of on the injury front. Polanco is playing in A-ball right now, and apparently he's been hitting pretty good, I guess, from what I've heard from the box score and everything. So that's a good sign there. It sounds like he might be making a rehab assignment with the Saints fairly soon here.
What do you have for your musing, Hoges?
My question is what is the bullpen hierarchy, and is there one? And if there isn't, do we care?
Yeah, at this point, I don't. I think that Rocco has made almost every correct decision. He's pulled guys when he needed to pull them. He's left them in when they needed to work out their struggles. I'm thrilled with it. I love that he's using Lopez and Duran as he sees that they're needed. I don't know. Yes, I do think that Lopez and Duran are obviously your high leverage guys, but high leverage can be the seventh inning right now.
And that's what I love. I love that he looks at it when it matters the most. Like in game 2, when Lopez comes in the 7th inning right away there, I love that move because you're like, this is where we need to hold this lead right now. This is what's happening in this ballgame with the score that it currently is. And these are important matchups that we want one of our best guys to be playing. And I don't think that needs to restrict you to just the 8th and the 9th inning. And if those two guys are as interchangeable as they've been so far this year, that's just huge for the Twins.
Yeah, I do sort of miss it's closer time and it's going to be this guy. And like I would be full on lying if I said I didn't love the idea of just having a closer, an actual official closer. But honestly, for the way that the Twins have produced so far this season, this is probably the right way, even if I would prefer it, in my ideal reality of baseball for there to be an official closer.
Oh, I can't argue with you at all. Like the sexiness of having a closer come out like that and you just know who it is pretty incredible. But like stat wise, this makes so much sense. And the Twins' ability to be able to do this, I mean, not every team can do this. And for them to be able to have that option so far this year, that's the way to go. But yeah, I do miss just knowing who that guy is and seeing him warm up, and then the entrance music and everything is kind of a bummer to not have.
All right, well, let's go ahead and grade this series, Hoges.
Series grades.
I'll let you go first there, Mr. Hogan.
I went with an A. You beat a team 2 out of 3 that you lost to 6 times last year, the defending World Series champions. And granted, they haven't been great this year, but they'll figure it out. The season is still early. I did think it was interesting how Dusty Baker mentioned that maybe the reason that they struck out so many times is because Vasquez was there and knew their batters from last year, and he was able to handle the staff so well. But yeah, you have to give them an A. You have to give them an A. 2 out of 3 against the defending World Series champs is an A.
I don't even know anymore, Hoges. I don't understand what I should give them according to your rubric and what I should give them according to my rubric, which you're convinced makes no sense. I'm giving them a B because they won 2 out of 3 games against a very good baseball team, and they went into this series knowing that it was going to be an important series to see how good this team can actually be. I think in Game 3, they sort of waved the white flag a little bit as far as how things shook out, and I think that they could have produced more, seeing as they only managed to get 2 hits in Game 3. I love that they won 2 games, but I'm not going to give them an A if they only win 2 of 3.
If they win 2 out of 3 from here on out, you know that we're going to be the best team in baseball history, right? I mean, like, what are you... It's so frustrating to me. Like, I think this one makes me more mad than our A-minus disagreement, because the defending World Series champs that they got swept by last year, and they won 2 out of 3, and in pretty convincing fashion that they looked like they were the better team. I'm just so frustrated. I don't know how to make you happy.
Well, I don't know how to make you happy. I'm not trying to make you. I'm not trying to make. I don't understand why you're trying to make me happy, Hoges. I'm just giving you my grade as I see it. Game 3, this team didn't produce. They didn't even make it interesting throughout the game, so I'm going to give them a B. They weren't even close in Game 3.
So if you're the Washington Generals playing the Harlem Globetrotters, and you win 2 out of 3 in a series that you're never ever supposed to win, do you still come on the air afterwards and be like, I give them a B? They should have won all 3. No, it's curved based on who they're playing.
Okay. See, we're not having this nuanced discussion again. I'm done. I'm giving them a B. And I do want to say what you just did. I forget the English term for it, so I wish Dan was here so he could tell me. Hyperbole, I think, is the correct term I'm looking for here. But my goodness, Hoges, the Washington Generals playing the Globetrotters, you just compared to the Twins playing the Houston Astros. You think that's a fair 1-to-1 comparison?
We've already talked about this. Our analogies when Dan Thompson isn't on the podcast are trash. They're just not great.
Ogres are like onions. End of story.
All right, well, with that, let's go to Herbie's headlines.
I don't know, Jack. It looked like Herbie pulled him off the bag.
Herbie's headlines.
Okay. We're going to sort of lump two things that happened. Weird things happen in baseball all the time, but these are two of the weirdest things, and they happened in the same week. We're going to start with one of Dano's favorite things. You'll notice, Dan Thompson, I've shortened your name to Dano while you've been gone. I know how you love that. But so we're going to start with a couple of weird stat things. The first being a no-hitter, Hoges, in which the team that threw the no-hitter lost.
And not only did they lose, they lost 7-5 in a no-hitter. And it was a 7-inning game, and it was a shutout until the 7th inning. They were winning 5-0 until the 7th inning. So I saw this on Twitter, actually. The team was talking about how they threw a no-hitter and they lost. I'm like, oh, it had to have been 1-0. I clicked on the box score, and I saw 7-5, and I'm like, okay, I clicked the wrong box score. That's not possible, but just unbelievable. There were 7 walks, 5 hit by pitches, and I think there were 6 errors in the game. I mean, just unbelievable. Baseball is such a beautiful sport, except when it isn't.
Yes. So this was the Chattanooga Lookouts who won the game.
They beat the Trash Bandits, I think was the name of the...
Trash Pandas.
Trash Pandas, that's what it is.
Yes.
I love it.
Anyway, and then the other sort of weird story here, again, a no-hitter for Dan's sake, a guy named Brady Ware, he plays D2 for the University of Indianapolis. He throws a no-hitter and also hits for the cycle in the same game.
I mean, that is unbelievably impressive. I mean, what else is everyone doing on the team if you can do that for the whole thing? But back to the Chattanooga Lookouts, this might be the only time where I agree with Dan, where this no-hitter might not mean quite as much.
Okay, with those two weird stats, Hoges, let's start looking ahead to the White Sox series and do our Puckett's picks.
And we'll see you tomorrow night.
Puckett's picks.
So again, folks, if you're new to the show, we each pick a player who we think is going to perform best in the next series. Hoges, when he's here, picks for the listeners, and then whoever goes first between Dan and I is the person who did better. So if you won Puckett's picks, you pick last. If you lost to the listeners, you still may pick last if you scored more than the other guy. So Hoges, you get the first pick. Who are you taking off the board?
I've been getting too cute a little bit at the beginning of this year, so I'm just going with Byron Buxton right here. It looks like his swing's coming into form. His batting average is sky high so far this year, and getting that home run on that gimme pitch right down the middle. Now he's got a home run and some RBI on the stat sheet, so I'm going with Buxton. I think he's going to do great against the White Sox. It always seems to be a team that he hits well against too, especially at Target Field.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Correa because I have to. I've painted myself in this box, and here's the thing. You know now if I don't pick him, he's going to go off. He's going to hit like 4 homers in the series. It's going to be ridiculous. So I have to take Carlos Correa.
Oh, yeah. You're committed now. Sunk cost fallacy be darned. You're committed to him.
I will. You know what? I watched the first 3 seasons of The Walking Dead. I might as well watch the next 30 that they did.
It's another 300-hour commitment to your life, but it's fine. You just got to. You have to.
Yeah, it's got to be done. Anyway, with that, Dan takes Trevor Larnach, which you really can't fault him for at this point because, like we've said so far this episode, he's sort of cemented himself as a very important piece to this team.
Yeah, which is awesome. I love that Larnach is getting picked here. It makes me feel good about how he's producing at the beginning of this year, and hopefully this guy can stay healthy and keep producing for the Twins.
Okay, Hoges, it's your time to shine. Now, I do have a quick caveat here. So typically, folks, again, if you didn't listen last season, if Hoges is filling in on a show, he gets an opportunity to listen back to any of the episodes that Dan and I have put together, and he can offer either a David's Dumbs or a Dan's Dumbs in the instance that he feels we were incorrect about something that we've said on a previous episode. Now, I'm making an exception here because Hoges recorded these episodes with me. So for him to be able to go back and call it a David's Dumbs is a bit ridiculous. Let me play the sounder and then I'll give you the floor anyway, Hoges, because I'm a gracious guy like that.
Just a bit outside. He tried the corner and missed.
David's Dumbs.
I love how you're making the rules for my segment. Like, shouldn't it be my rules that are on here? And when we'll get to it eventually, this had not been decided when we were talking about it, and I was still bitter about it. But, folks, I would like to let everyone know that our original argument from the first series, when Gallo hit the grounder that went into right field, and I believe it was the left fielder that was playing in right field, he fumbled it, and he ended up getting to first. David and I had a massive argument at Target Field about whether or not it should have been scored a hit or an error. They charged it an error, which makes no sense to me, because if an outfielder flubs a ground ball on a hit to the outfield, that is a hit every single time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, on Friday night at about 2 a.m, justice was served. They changed it from an error to a hit. I was so giddy. My family and I had just gotten back from Florida, so I was up late, and I was checking Twitter, and I saw it on there, and I nearly called David and woke him up in the middle of the night just to let him know that this had been changed. A point has been added for the listeners for Gallo getting a single instead of an error. His batting average actually went up like 50 points from like 220 to 270 after that change was made. But vindication, how sweet you are.
Okay, we're done with that. I cannot wait to have this discussion with Dan Thompson about this Gallo error and to get his thoughts. That being said, Dan has returned. He is stateside once again, so he will be back in studio recording with me per usual. Hoges, I gotta say, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for filling in. It's been a huge help. It allowed Dan to get away, and it was even more impressive, Hoges. You were on vacation for half of these recordings, and you were still able to get it done.
Well, that's my commitment to the podcast. I don't know where Dan's commitment to the podcast is, but I've definitely shown that I was committed. But yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. It's always fun to be able to fill in. It was a little bit different this time, filling in a few times in a row. I had less material to come after you with because I didn't get to listen to all the dumb things that you guys normally say in between, but I had an absolute blast. It's fun talking about this team. I mean, we're going to look real closely at this record with how it goes with Dan being back. I mean, 6-3. I'll take 6-3 to start this year.
I was just worried that by the time Dan got back, the team was going to be irrelevant. They were going to start the season 0-9, and it's like nobody's listening to the show anymore because nobody wants to hear about how the Twins just got swept by the Astros.
In all seriousness, it has been an absolutely fantastic start to the season. This team, not only are they winning games, but they've been very fun to watch. A solid fundamental baseball, good starting pitching, good relieving. I mean, let's keep this going. It's looking good. This year's been great.
All right, well, thanks again, Hoges. I'm going to go ahead and send us out. Well, folks, if you like what you hear, please tell a friend. You can follow us on Twitter at Min for the Win and find our Min for the Win Facebook page. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube so that you're notified when new episodes are available. If you could leave us a rating or a like, we'd greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to support the show further, you can find us on Patreon. The link is in the description. Thanks for listening, and as always, go Twins. That'll wrap up another episode of Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, go Twins.